While you may think that coding doesn't have a place in the literacy classroom, you might be missing out on an opportunity to pair coding in your literacy block to improve reading comprehension and language comprehension. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how to use coding strategies with picture books to improve reading and language comprehension. Stay tuned. So what is coding? In a nutshell, coding is just an algorithm that is placed into a computer system that makes something happen. And in today's classroom, there's a lot of emphasis on computer science instruction in a lot of the high schools, especially here in my state, and maybe in yours as well. And the reason is because there are so many computer science jobs available today, but there's not as many kids that are graduating college with computer science degrees. And so we're trying to get students excited about coding and excited about computer science. Now in the elementary school, it's a little bit different because a lot of schools don't have any type of computer science class. Computer labs are pretty much, while there are some still available, most of the computer skills that are taught are in the classroom because of one-to-one instruction. And so what does that do for teachers like you and me who really we teach math, we teach science, we teach literacy, reading, writing, phonics? How can we incorporate coding? Now, a lot of times teachers will say, well, I just don't have time for that. And while I would tend to agree with you, there are some things that you can do, believe it or not, that you can incorporate coding into your classroom and have loads of fun with your students and teach to your standards. So why is this important? Now, if you've read my blog, you know that I talk a lot about the science of reading and language comprehension. And I really think this is so important because it's, in my opinion, a little bit of a missing piece in some of the training that we receive about the science of reading. A lot of focus is on things like word recognition, phonics, phonemic awareness. A lot of talk about that, but there's not a lot of talk about language comprehension. Now, if you know anything about the simple view of reading, if you've never heard of it, it's basically just a simple view of how word recognition times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. Now, what does that mean? In order for a student to do well in their reading comprehension, they must have not only their word recognition, such as phonics, phonemic awareness, but they also need to have language comprehension, which is things like the ability to understand spoken language. Now, in order to have that, they need to have vocabulary. They need to have background knowledge in order to understand the text. And so because of that, they need experiences. One of the things that I love to do with helping students gain those experiences is to do more of a hands-on approach. I think that's important. And so to develop students' listening and language comprehension, we need to spend a lot of time doing three things. The first thing is we have to build their background knowledge. Now, the best way to do that is through experiences such as experiments and such as video, things that maybe they have not been able to see. Video is really good. Pictures are really good if they've never had experience with it. And then, of course, vocabulary development. Developing students' vocabulary is going to help them in gaining more understanding about what they're reading. And then, of course, understanding sentence structure, text structure, those things help as well. As an educator, we all know the importance of read alouds. And so anytime you can read aloud to your students, that is always a great thing to do in order to build students' language comprehension. Now, in today's idea that I have for you, relating this to coding, I'm going to take it to a book that I love to do with my students. It's called Snowmen at Night. And if you've ever read it before, it's a really cute book about what snowmen do at night. And it's also good because it has circular ending. And so the language at the beginning of the book and at the end of the book are similar. Now, I like to read this story and relate it to coding because of that circular ending. Now, the cool thing about coding and literacy, if you don't know this, coding and literacy have a lot in common. For example, with coding, you have characters, you have events, or, just like you would have what happens first, what happens next, what happens last. And then you would also have a setting in your story as well. And so in this particular lesson, these are the things that students will learn. They're going to learn the basic coding techniques. They're going to learn how to animate their scenes from Snowmen at Night. So once you've read the story to them, they're actually going to retell this story. And then they're going to be able to analyze other books with circular endings and be able to create their own digital stories with coding, and also to show what stories have circular endings and what stories do not. So the first thing that I always do when I do lessons like this is I want to take it just to the literacy. I don't want to think about the technology. Technology for this particular instance is just a tool. It's not something that honestly, I don't necessarily have to have this to teach this lesson. I don't have to use technology, but the reason why it's going to be so good compared to some other things that I could do is because of the hands-on things that I'm going to be able to let them do. And that idea of being able to create, that is just so important for students to build those experiences. So the first thing when I read the story, I'm just going to enjoy it. I'm not going to do anything special but enjoy. I'm going to build some background knowledge though, because I know where I live, my students don't have a lot of experiences with snow. We don't get a lot of snow here. So I want to talk to them about, have you ever built a snowman? What did you use to build your snowman? I want you to predict what might happen in the story based on the cover. So what's going to happen in the story based on the cover that we see. And then I'm going to just read the story. I'm not going to stop really. There might be a few vocabulary words that I think they're going to need to know, but I'm not going to do a whole lot with, asking questions and stuff. We're just going to read to enjoy. That's it. Now, as we dive deeper into the literacy and language comprehension, I'm going to start reminding the students of the focus. Now, our focus is going to be the circular endings, because I want them to think about what types of words did the author use at the beginning of the story and at the end of the story. I want them to be thinking about that. And then I'm going to create an anchor chart, because I want them to see several things, because this is going to be in part of their coding activity. So I want them to think about the characters. What characters are in the story? I want them to think about the setting. And I want to think about words and phrases that the author used in the story. And this is going to be important. So as we analyze the beginning and end of the story, I'm going to ask students what they're noticing about the beginning of the story, what they're noticing about the end. And I'm going to talk about the repeated language that the author uses. This is important because of coding, because we're going to also look at a coding strategy that is used called loops. So we're going to compare the idea of what we do in reading with coding. As I integrate that coding into literacy, I am going to look at the app called Scratch Junior. That's the app that I like to use. It's only available with the iPad. However, you can use Scratch, so that's available anywhere. It's online. It's a little bit more difficult to use than Scratch Junior, but I don't want you to think that kids of younger ages can't use it, because they can. I've used it with kids of all ages. There's just going to need to be more scaffolding. And then I also don't want you to think that kids that have iPads, even older kids, if you're using a picture book with older kids, I want you to know that kids, even in high school, we've used Scratch Junior with high school students. They love it because even though it might look a little bit like a younger student would use it, there's some really creative tools in there that they can use. And I'm going to show you that in a second. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to have students choose or draw the characters. So as you can see, students are able to go into Scratch Junior and they're able to find characters that have already been made, but then they also have the ability to draw their own characters. This would be great for older kids because they would be able to really create some cool characters. I could even see them animating this even more so with drawing their characters in different angles and different ways they move their body and so forth. Once you've drawn your character, so if I'm asking the students to retell the story, then we are going into looking at the setting. And Scratch Junior has tons of settings that they can choose from, but then here again, you can draw your own setting, which is really nice. I'm then going to ask students to retell the story only with the beginning of the story and the end of the story because I want them to show the circular ending. I want them to show how the beginning of the story and the end of the story relate to each other. And I also, because you can add text to your story, I want them to be able to see the language. I want them to add those words and phrases that the author uses to show that circular ending. And then they're going to animate their scenes using the blocks that you have here. You can animate those to move your characters from place to place. And also, I want them to understand the idea of loops. Now, loops will allow them to repeat the action over and over again, which is what happens in the story Snowmen at Night. And that's what makes it so cool and how it's so infused and integrated together. They now know how to use the app. They know all about Snowmen at Night and understand a little bit about circular endings. I then like to have my kids pair or put in groups to look at other books to determine if they have circular endings or not. Another cool thing that I do, and I usually do this even before I introduce the app to the students, is I do an unplugged activity with Snowmen. It's called a Snowman Jig, and I just have cards that are placed on little magnets on the back, and I'll put it on my magnetic board, and students will create a dance. And I have some looping cards as well, so I might put like arms up, and then I'll have it looped like 2 times. And so you can see in this example how students can do that, and it's really cool. And that's it. That's kind of how you can do this book, Snowmen at Night, but I hope you can see how you could use this with other books. I mean, when you discuss characters, setting, problem, solution, you could create events. You could do even more with compare and contrast, other types of strategies and reading skills that you're teaching. The sky's really the limit with it. The thing that you have to do first is just teach the app, let them get used to it, and then you can do all kinds of cool digital storytelling with your kids. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you would, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Click on that bell so you'll know when I post a new video, and comment below if you've ever tried digital storytelling in your classroom or if you'd like to try it in your classroom. I will talk to you soon and have a great day.